All right, it's finally up. I'd say good morning, but who knows what time it is now. Anyway, this is our last section of the year, moving into the 21st century, part two, the new century. We're going to cover the administrations of Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and Barack Obama. So 1994 to about 2010 or so. All right, so let's get started. So we'll start with the Clinton years. Now, after 20 years of the last 24, the Republicans had controlled the White House. So many Americans were ready for a change. But who would lead that change? Now, the election of 1992. Now, the Bush was easily renominated nominated by the Republicans. He was the president of the United States. Dan Quayle is still on the running ticket, so he's running for re-election. Now, against him, the Democrats choose a Southern outsider named Bill Clinton. He was young, very charismatic. He chooses Al Gore of Tennessee to be his running mate. Now, you see this, he beat out a crowded field of 8 Democrats who dropped out for one reason or other, and Bill Clinton, even though he lost the first primary, stormed back and took the nomination. Now, the Republicans would try to compare him to Jimmy Carter, also a Southern Democrat, kind of a negative way. Now, you can see there's a spot there. There is a third person. It was a Texas billionaire by the name of Ross Perot, and he's going to run as an independent. He was concerned about the deficit, and he was opposed to NAFTA, which is a treaty with Canada and Mexico. Now, in the election, got our posters up there, our little things, our signs. In the election, the Republicans were angry with Bush for breaking his tax pledge. Remember his pledge? No new taxes, read my lips, no new taxes. Well, he did raise the taxes, but he had to. He had no choice. Now, Perot leads in the polls early. But as the economy keeps going down, Bush starts to fall behind in the polls. Now, despite rumors of affairs, and there were a lot of rumors, he was accused of dodging the draft during the Vietnam War and smoking marijuana, though he did claim he didn't inhale. Clinton's popularity keeps going up. And ultimately, Clinton wins the election 370 to 168. You can see here, winning the blue states being Clinton. Some southern states like Arkansas, Louisiana, Tennessee, Georgia do go for Clinton. So along with also the big states like California, Illinois, Pennsylvania, and New York. So Clinton wins. Now, Perot didn't win any states, but he got over 20 million votes. All right, so after leaving the White House, George and Barbara Bush retired to Texas. There they are saying goodbye. Bush would then take up skydiving. And here we have a picture of him. He was 90 years old and he's going skydiving. I hope I can do that. I don't know about the skydiving part though. Now, 2 of his sons did enter politics and they ran for governors of their states where they lived. George W. Bush won in Texas, but Jeb Bush lost in Florida. This was in 1996. Bush won again in 98. And Jeb Bush would win in 98. Now, after Clinton left office in 8 years, Bush and Clinton actually become very good friends, and they worked together on a lot of charities. The joke is that Clinton was another one of Bush's sons who became president. And the United States Navy named a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, the USS George H.W. Bush. All right, still naming those aircraft carriers. And Bush built his presidential library at Texas A&M University down in Houston. I haven't been there, it's on my list. So, now this is an interesting, I just want to put this up. When Obama was president, all 4 ex-presidents returned to the White House. We have George H. Bush on the left, President Obama, President George W. Bush, President Clinton, and President Carter. All right, and They all visited away. So we have all five presidents and four ex-presidents all together here in the Oval Office. Just thought it was a good picture. In 2017, Bush celebrated his 94th birthday. Unfortunately, it would be his last. His wife Barbara died the year before, and a year later, Bush will die. All right, so William Jefferson Clinton of Arkansas. Of course, everyone called him Bill. He was our 42nd president. He was born William Jefferson Bly III on August 19th, 1946 in Hope, Arkansas. In fact, him and George W. Bush are only born a few months apart. His father died in a car accident 3 months before he was born, and his mother remarried to a man named Roger Clinton. So that's why they have the change to the Clinton last name. That's their home in Hope, Arkansas. Now, he learned to play the saxophone in school. There he is, and he actually considered becoming a musician. Later, when he was running for president, he actually played on one of those late-night TV shows. I think it was Arsenio, but... Now, this was a real changing moment for him. In 1963, he was 16 years old. He was a high school student, and he met President John F. Kennedy. There he is shaking hands with President Kennedy. He counts this as one of his most memorable moments. I probably would, too. Now, here he is in college. This is his college picture. He graduated from Georgetown University in 1968. He won a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford, England, and then he finished up at Yale Law School in 1973. While he was at Yale, well, first of all, I want to say he avoided the draft and he protested the Vietnam War. That became very controversial later. While he was at Yale in 1975, he met and marries Hillary Rodham. There they are, their wedding picture. They have one child, Chelsea. This is a much later picture when they were in the White House. Now, in 1978, he was elected governor of Arkansas, one of the youngest governors they would ever have. He does look young. We always see pictures of Clinton now with gray hair, so it's funny to see him with dark hair. I once had dark hair too. But this looks more like my high school picture. I noticed that this morning with all my hair. I haven't had a haircut since March. Anyway, let's move on. Now, the Clinton years. Now, despite all the negatives, Clinton, who was called the comeback kid, actually he called himself that, and the name kind of stuck, was very popular. Here he is up with Al Gore, Clinton with his wife Hillary in blue, and Al Gore's wife Tipper in pink. Now, Clinton will have problems dealing with a slumping economy. 2 years later, the midterm elections, the Republicans take control of Congress, and they want to scale back government. Now, this becomes known as the Republicans' Contract with America. It was led by the Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. He's holding up here, having a big conference, and they're going to cut back on all the things Clinton wants to do. So Clinton is constantly fighting with them on many issues. But Clinton's smart. He realizes to get things done, he's going to have to work with them, and they do. He comes together with Gingrich, and they start making deals, and they get the economy going again. So that was a good thing. All right, during his first term in 1994, former President Richard Nixon, first president to have to resign, died at the age of 81. He was buried at his presidential library in Yorba Linda, California. We see all the ex-presidents here, President Bill Clinton and ex-presidents George Bush, Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter, and Gerald Ford. They were all at his funeral. His library here, this is the building where the library is actually very pretty, a lot of landscaping. I was here, I don't know, about 10, 12 years ago. And there's Nixon and his wife, Pat Nixon. She died after him, a few years after him. He did get a stamp. All ex-presidents get a stamp, but no aircraft carrier. Nixon's not going to have very many things named after him. But he did get a stamp. Now, in 1996, we have Clinton's going to run for re-election, and he wins pretty easily, 379 to 159. and he was helped because the economy was getting better. He defeated the Kansas Senator Bob Dole. He was a World War II vet, much older. So Clinton becomes the first Democrat to win 2 consecutive terms, presidential elections, since Franklin D. Roosevelt, who actually won 4. Now, Perot also ran again, but didn't do as well in 96. He only got around 10 million, half of what he did the election before that. Now, in 1998, Clinton is involved in a sex scandal. All right, we see Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton there, and it was ugly, and it led to the Republican-controlled House of Representatives votes to impeach Clinton. It's only the second time in our history that a president had been impeached. Of course, we just did it again, so it's now becoming kind of a regular thing. Where is it? There it is. Most Americans supported Clinton. They felt he was doing a good job, and it becomes just like the past one with Trump. It becomes very partisan. The Democrats vote to acquit, while the Republicans vote for him to become guilty. But in the end, there were more Democrats. In 1999, the Senate votes to acquit. So Bill Clinton is not kicked out. He's allowed to stay in office. Now, after the 8 years, Bill Clinton, his term is over. He's not allowed to run again. So we have to have a new election. So the election of 2000. This would be interesting. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention this earlier. I was very happy when Bill Clinton won because I voted for him. In fact, I voted for him twice. But Bill Clinton became the first president that I voted for that actually won. Before that, I had voted for Jimmy Carter in 1980, lost. I voted for Walter Mondale in 1984, lost. I voted for Michael Dukakis in 1992, lost. So finally, Clinton became the first president that I actually won, I actually voted for that I actually won in 1992 and then again in 1996. That streak's about to end in 2000. This was a crazy election. Now, the Democrats nominate the vice president, Clinton's vice president, Al Gore of Tennessee, and he chooses as his running mate Joe Lieberman. He would be the first Jewish candidate on a major ticket. Now, Al Gore is very pro-environment, concerns over global warming. He's a front runner, and there's really no opposition to him. Now, running against him is the Republican nominee, George W. Bush, and he chooses Dick Cheney, probably the most powerful vice president we ever had, as his running mate. Bush calls himself the compassionate conservative. He's a front runner. He has all of his father's connections, so there's little doubt that he's not going to get the nomination. Okay, where are we here? Okay, up there's our signs. Now, this is probably the most controversial election we've had since 1876. There's a lot of questions about the votes in Florida. Originally, it was called for Bush, but then a lot of late votes were coming in that were going for Gore. So Bush had Gore had conceded. Then he changed his mind. They come back. They had to go back and start examining the ballots. We became, as you can see, the people here looking here. We became to know what a hanging chad is. That's when you punch those little things through the ticket, and they fully come off, and they go through a machine. And it went days and days, and then weeks and weeks, and we didn't know who the president was going to be. Newsweek put out this magazine, and here's our new president, by splitting half Gore, half Bush's photos. So again, over and over, and it just every day we didn't know. Finally, the Supreme Court steps in, and they decide to give the election to Bush. So Bush will become the next president. These are people arguing protesting in front of the Supreme Court. I did like, even though I voted for Gore and he did lose, I did like that the sign that they took the Gore Lieberman and then they changed it to Sore Loserman, hit the crying towel. So I got to say that was a little bit clever. All right, so George W. Bush of Texas becomes our 43rd president. It's only the second time we've had a father-son president, John Adams and John Quincy Adams. Now we have George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush. So he's often referred to as Bush 43, so as not to confuse him with his father, who's referred to then as Bush 41. He was born on July 6, 1946 in New Haven, Connecticut, while his father was a student at Yale University. They grew up in Midland, Texas, so that's why he refers to himself as a Texan. He did go to a lot of New England prep schools. Here's one of those yearbook pictures. And he graduated from Yale University, like his father did, in 1968. And also that year, he joined the Texas Air National Guard and became a jet fighter pilot. That's the jet fighters he flew. I don't really know the name of it. I'm not really up on my, types of jets. There was a lot of criticism later that he joined the Air National Guard, or his father got him in, so he wouldn't have to go to Vietnam. But whatever the case, he did become a jet fighter pilot. He graduated from the Harvard Business School in 1975. And in 1977, he married his school teacher, Laura Welsh. They have two daughters, Barbara and Jenna. This is an earlier picture of them. You can see it's up in Maine at Kennebunkport. Barbara and Jenna are older now. Have they both got married?
I know the blonde is.
One, we are.
I don't know about Barbara.
Yeah, Jenna got married. I'm not sure, but we don't know about Barbara. But one of them, they're a lot older now. They're in their 20s, maybe 30s now. I don't know. Yeah, it could be 30s by now, yeah. Right, that's true. Now, in 1998, Bush becomes a part owner of the Texas Rangers. They're big baseball fans. His father was a big fan of the Houston Astros. So Bush becomes a fan of the Texas Rangers. Here he is wearing his Texas Ranger jacket. All right. Let's see, we can move on here. We got a little stall. Okay. The program has slowed down and stopped. Give it a second. Let's see if it starts up again, or else I'll just have to start it all over again. All right, let's start it over again. It seems, oh, no, there we go. All right, in 1994, he entered politics and was elected governor of Texas. We mentioned that earlier. All right, now he's only in office like 6 months, and we have the September 11th attacks. On September 11th, 2001, Muslim terrorists launched terror attacks on America. They hijacked 4 commercial airliners and crashed them into buildings. 2 of them were out of Boston Airport, 1 out of Newark Airport, and 1 out of Washington, D.C. Airport. So they hijacked 4 commercial airliners. 2 of the airliners fly into the Twin Towers in New York City. One hit the North Tower earlier in the morning, and then the second one came in afterwards. The 3rd airliner crashed into the Pentagon building in Washington, D.C., as we see here. Now, the 4th airliner, after finding out what happened, passengers there attempt to retake control of the 4th plane, but the hijackers decide to crash it into the ground in Pennsylvania. There's a memorial there today, but you can see here's where they killed everyone on board. This was the single deadliest terrorist attack in human history. Terrorist attacks were done by the Islamic terrorist group Al-Qaeda. Now, both Twin Towers collapsed. 2,977 people would die in the attacks. Oh, I meant to mention that it was planned by Osama bin Laden, who we mentioned earlier, who was one of the Mujahideen fighting against the Soviet Union. It was also the single deadliest incident for firefighters. 343 New York City firefighters died in the attack, with an additional 72 law enforcement officers. This is the worst in the history of the United States. So America will become changed, and this will change us. There is a beautiful memorial down in over in New York City. If you've ever been there, it's really nice. They have these pools. You can see the water here. The new PATH station's up there on the left. So it is very nice. And they have a museum there too that you can visit. Now, we're going to talk about the invasion of Afghanistan. The 9/11 terrorist group, Al-Qaeda, was in Afghanistan, which at the time had been pretty much controlled by an ultra-religious group known as the Taliban. So in 2001, the U.S. military forces invade Afghanistan. This was known as Operation Enduring Freedom. The goal of the U.S. was to destroy the Taliban so terrorist groups would not have safe havens in Afghanistan. Now, the U.S. would take control of Afghanistan within months. Afghanistan has no real military. However, and we would destroy major parts of Taliban forces. Now, the U.S. military has been in Afghanistan since maintaining the peace. This is the longest war in the history of the United States. Right now, we've been there for 19, going on 20 years. Now, after 9/11, the United States Congress passes the Patriot Act. These were a series of new laws meant for national security. They created a new department, the Department of Homeland Security. They would actually take over a number of organizations under him, the TSA, that checks airline screenings, considering that all the terrorists, there were 21 of them, 21 of them had gotten on board airplanes, Customs, Border Patrol, they were all placed under the control of this new department. Also, during this time, the capture of terrorists in Afghanistan and later Iraq, they were brought to Guantanamo and they would be tortured there, waterboarding, and this is going to become very controversial. Now we're going to talk about the Second Gulf War. Now, Saddam Hussein was suspected by the Bush administration of having or trying to get weapons of mass destruction, what are referred to as WMD. Now, Iraq had a nuclear program, and the U.S. thought they may build nuclear weapons. Secretary of State Colin Powell went to the United Nations to present evidence, but he didn't convince a lot of countries. There was a small bunch, Britain, Australia, Poland, who agreed to go with us, but a lot of other countries did not. Now, in 2003, the invasion of Iraq by the United States-led coalition of military forces. I remember it was on the news. The U.S. Military fired missiles, these were cruise missiles, into Iraq in what was called shock and awe. There were videos on TV showing buildings blowing up, and we had cameramen there. CNN was showing this in the news. Across the border in there are A-1 Abrams tanks just rolling through the desert. The Iraqis had been under an embargo of military weapons and parts since the first war, so most of their army was in, tanks were in very bad shape, they were missing parts, so it was real easy just to roll through the countryside there toward Iraq, to the capital of Baghdad. And the Iraqi forces were quickly destroyed. Now, Baghdad falls in 3 weeks. Here they are pulling down the statue of Saddam Hussein, who, by the way, disappeared. So overall, in 5 weeks, the whole country had been taken over. Now, Hussein was later found by the United States military. He was found hiding in a hole in I believe it was Tikrit. He was later convicted in an Iraqi court, and he was executed by hanging. So Saddam Hussein is no more. Now, there's a widespread insurgency following it. We have to fight against constant terrorist attacks against our forces. Many soldiers are killed or seriously injured in bombings. The Iraqi insurgents had these things called IEDs, individual explosive devices. They would booby-trap roads, and when American vehicles like the Humvee, you see here, would drive by, they would explode, killing and maiming many American soldiers. In 2007, a American surge of troops finally turned the tide towards the U.S. and really you don't see too much of those attacks again. Now in 2004, Bush has to run for re-election, but he's very popular because of the war, but it is very close. He wins 286 to 251. He defeats Massachusetts Senator John Kerry. Like Dukakis, the Republicans label Kerry as a Massachusetts liberal. Now, Kerry was a decorated Vietnam War veteran, but the Republicans started a campaign called Swift Vets for Truth. These were named after these swift boats you see here in the picture there. They were used in Vietnam. They would be up and down the rivers, and they would have American soldiers on board and help combat the Viet Cong. And they brought these men who were on some of these boats, and they basically were saying that Kerry was not a war hero. He didn't deserve the medals he got, and they basically wanted to smear his Vietnam record. In fact, today it becomes a political term to swift boat someone, swift boating, to describe an unfair or untrue political attack, to destroy destroy an opponent's political credibility or his reputation. Now, in his second term, President Gerald Ford passes away. In the year 2006, he was 93 years old. At the time, he was the oldest living president, but it's since been passed by President George H.W. Bush, who passed away last year, and Jimmy Carter, who's 95, and he's still going strong. Now, this is the Gerald R. Ford Presidential Library and Museum in Grand Rapids or Grand Forks? Grand Rapids, yeah. Grand Forks is in North Dakota. Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's buried there. We got to visit him. Kind of nice there. You can see it right on the, it's right along the water, right outside the museums. He got a stamp. There it is, 41 cents to mail a letter. Wow. And he has a statue in the Capitol Rotunda. Every state's allowed to have 2 statues, and they took out an old one and they put in a statue to Gerald Ford, which is very appropriate. And like everyone else, he has an aircraft carrier. This is the USS Gerald R. Ford. It wasn't commissioned, though, until after he died. It was actually commissioned 3 years ago in 2017. It's our newest nuclear aircraft carrier. So this is our brand new version, the first one that was built. They're building another one right now, which I believe they're naming the USS John F. Kennedy. It's a replacement for an older one that was commissioned back right after he died. Now, the financial crisis of 2008. This is the 2008 housing bubble. It burst. A lot of people had bought homes. I remember housing prices were going skyrocketing. Our neighbors around us in 2006, 2005 were selling homes for $500,000, and these were not worth that much. Everyone was, the housing bubble just got bigger and bigger. Everyone was making money. Everyone was buying these, taking out these mortgages. There was no way they could repay it, but people said, oh, when the price goes up, you can sell it and then get your money back. Then 2008, the housing bubble burst. There were a lot of bad loans, and this caused huge debt. The problem was the banks and the lending institutions that had written out these loans. Many of these investment banks faced bankruptcy. 2 of them, 2 major ones that had gone back to the 1800s, Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, actually collapsed and were forced to close. Here they are, carting away a Lehman Brothers sign. Now, the country does go into a recession, and it quickly goes global. The stock market collapsed. It dropped 7,721 points, 54%. It was only around 14,000 at the time, and it dropped to under half. So this is a total panic. Millions of people are out of work, and a lot of them just have huge debts. These homes that they had bought and they owe, $500,000, $1 million are now worth 1/10 of that, and they can't pay back the loans. This is the most serious financial crisis since the Great Depression. Now, Congress and President Bush come up with a thing called TARP, T-A-R-P. Congress gave that, which was the Troubled Assets Relief Program. It was $700 billion, and that's billion with a B, were given to banks, these investment banks like Chase Manhattan, American Express, Wells Fargo, all these banks, and they would do is they would buy and take control of these investment banks, and basically it was to keep them afloat. Now, naturally, when all these people are out of work, are going bankrupt, the fact that the government is going to give $700 billion to banks and to rich people who start giving out bonuses to their employees, it really made people angry. We see the banks were considered by a lot of people to be too big to fail. All right, as you can see this political cartoon here. Wall Street, too big to fail, too big to jail. A lot of people thought people should go to jail for this. What's that? And nobody did. Nobody went to jail. People were outraged. Banks are helped and not them. Here we see the taxpayers underwater holding up the fat Wall Street guy. There were protests. You know, why are these people getting away with this and we are out of work? I like this one here. The people there playing dead bodies in front of the Wall Street Bowl in Wall Street. But it does start the what becomes known as the Occupy Wall Street protest. You know, they're going to go down and occupy Wall Street because people are and still are angry. They've made a number of movies about this. How was this allowed to happen? And it just ruined people's lives. And it probably saved America from the Second Great Depression. Okay, now we're going to talk about the election of 2008. This was another one I get to vote for a winner. Now, the Republicans choose elder statesman John McCain, and he will choose as his running mate the Alaska governor Sarah Palin. We'll talk about her later. Bush had served 2 terms, so he can't run again. McCain is a Vietnam War veteran, a hero he was shot down over Vietnam and spent 5 years in a prisoner of war camp in North Vietnam. Now, to run against him, the Democrats choose a young and fairly inexperienced Senator, Barack Obama. He was an Illinois senator, and he'll choose as his running mate Joe Biden of Delaware. Obama had only been in the U.S. Senate for 3 years, so he really didn't have a lot of experience. Now, he defeated in the primaries, Hillary Clinton, the wife of Bill Clinton, was heavily favored to win. But in the end, Obama does carry the nomination. The primaries were ugly. There were charges of racism and sexism. And as bad as that was, it would get a lot worse during the general election. Now, in the election, as I said, it got very ugly. McCain had chosen Alaska's Governor Sarah Palin. She was a real extremist. She was very unqualified, didn't really know very much about what was going on in the country or the world, but she appealed to the more extreme parts of the Republican Party. And she would have these rallies, and there was lots of complaints of racism. McCain, in the end, realized he couldn't even control her. But despite all that, McCain was hurt by the falling economy and the Iraq War. So these things kind of dragged him down. Obama, on the other hand, organized a new, what was called the Democratic Coalition. The Democrat Coalition has a lot of minorities, blacks, Asians, Hispanics, not Cubans so much, but Hispanics. So a lot of minorities, gay rights, all joined this new Democrat coalition. And this is what will really lead Obama to victory. Had to come up with the poster signs. In the election, there was a record voter turnout. People stood in line for hours. And in the end, Obama cruises to victory, 385 electoral votes to 173. Here we look on the states. He carried 28 of the 50 states, and he wins the popular vote by 7% here. You can see he wins states that that hadn't gone, like Indiana here. Indiana hadn't voted Democrat since 1964 with Lyndon B. Johnson. So you see Indiana, where is it here? Indiana up here, North Carolina over here, they hadn't gone Democrat in so many election cycles, and they came out for Obama. So this is really what puts Obama over the top, easily over the top. All right. All right, so let's talk about President Barack Obama. He's from Illinois. He is our 44th president. He's our first African-American president. Now, he was born on August 4th, 1961, and he's actually the first president who was born after I was born. So he's actually a year and a half younger than me, right? He's actually younger than both of us. So it's kind of like, growing up, you always had these old men being president. Now we had a president that's, younger than us. But don't worry, Trump's much older than us. So anyway, he was born on August 4th, 1961 in Honolulu, Hawaii. There it is. That's the beaches there when we were there a number of years ago. Now his mother was from Kansas. There he is with little Barack. And his father was from Kenya. That's when Barack was 10 years old. Oh, here we go. Yeah, they divorced when he was 3 years old. His mother did remarry, and they moved to Jakarta, Indonesia. He would spend 4 years there. But after those 4 years, he returned to live with his mom's mother and dad, his grandparents, in Hawaii. Interesting, his father was in the United States Army during World War II, was actually at Normandy and the fight across France. And his mother, his grandmother, I should say, was one of those factory workers, the Rosie the Riveter types. So they were very involved in during World War II. So there is Barack, who he went by Barry when he was in high school. Played basketball there. He loves playing basketball. Now, he graduated from Columbia University in New York City in 1983. There he met and then later married Michelle Robinson in 1992. They have 2 daughters, Malia and Sasha. They're in their 20s now, right? Oh, yeah, they're in college. So this is when they were first in the White House. Obama would graduate from Harvard Law School in 1991. While working at the University of Chicago, he got involved in politics. And like I said, in 2004, he was elected to the U.S. Senate. He's also a huge White Sox fan. So there he is. He likes to throw out baseballs and throw out the pitches from the mound at White Sox games. And we got a little pause here. We're going to go to the next screen. Give it a second. My computer's been very slow today. It was slow yesterday. It's been slow today. So right now I think we're still recording, but it is, so I have no idea if this is going to be on the final cut. I don't want to stop it because sometimes it's hard to get it back going again. So let's keep it. There we go. All right. Obamacare. This was the Affordable Care Act. This was something that Obama really wanted to do. So in 2009, he made health care coverage mandatory. There they are signing it. You see Vice President Joe Biden just to the left of the photograph, a lot of the other top Democrats in the photograph. I don't know who the kid is. But anyway, he does sign it. Many Republicans became very angry at this, and they were determined to end it. There were even challenges that went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did cutbacks on some of the things. They never did declare the ACA, which was nicknamed actually by the Republicans as Obamacare, though President Obama then just took the nickname himself. They never declared it unconstitutional. But it did make a lot of Republicans angry, and we see something that started a couple years earlier. The Tea Party really starts to go into high gear because they're angry over this whole Obamacare. So you can see they're, protesting here. The Tea Party is still around today. They like that. You see the yellow flag over here. Let's see, I can highlight it again. This flag here, that's the revolutionary flag, Don't Tread on Me, which has been adopted by the Tea Party as their flag. This one over here is interesting too. We see a pirate flag, but instead of the skull, you have Obama's face in the center of the pirate flag. I'm sure Obama probably thought that was funny. He had a sense of humor. Now, the Tea Party was mostly a lot of these middle-class white Americans upset over rising taxes and increasing national debt. Though it's amazing now the national debt still keeps going up under President Trump, and they don't really save very much. I wonder why. Now, 2011, big news. Osama bin Laden, the mastermind of 9/11, was found and killed by U.S. Navy SEALs. It was all over the news. President Obama made a big address about it. This was like not final revenge, but revenge for what happened on 9/11. Osama bin Laden had been the mastermind of that. The U.S. military, the CIA had eventually found out where he is, and there was a strike team of U.S. Navy SEALs that went into Pakistan. That's where he was hiding. They found his compound. He didn't. They told him to give up. He didn't, so they shot him. So nobody shed a tear over this one. Yet the country celebrated. Okay. Well, that's it. That's it. That's the end. Obama does win re-election. I meant I was going to put that in there, but I forgot. Obama does win re-election in 2012, but I'll put it in for next year. This is the end of the year for us. This is our last slide. I hope you enjoyed it. At least you got to a part where your parents were growing up. So, and you were alive during this too. So it's history and little current events there. Anyway, well, we have a Zoom meeting this afternoon. Obviously, by the time you're seeing this, we've already had it. So I want to just thank you very much for the year and enjoy your summer. And I'll see you around the halls next year when you are seniors. Ooh, scary. Seniors. Ooh. All right. Anyway, bye-bye. Take care.